which is running from 2025 to 2029. But the key strategic outcome in this strategic plan, we have summarized it in 4 key areas. And one of them is enhance the independence of the NAO, and also to increase the public trust in the work of the NAO, and to improve the public sector financial reporting landscape, and more importantly, and also to improve public financial management resources, how the resources of public financials are managed in the country. So these strategic outcomes, of course, are envisaged or intended on outputs. So we will have to conduct a series of activities that will lead us to this resource-driven strategic plan, to which we also are inviting stakeholders from all diverse walks and fields who are very critical in the work that we do in order to achieve this strategic plan. As we said, there are strategic outcomes, and you know that outcomes are not entirely within the control of the NAO. So it means that we have to work with critical stakeholders and also other people that are in the ecosystem of public financial management in order to achieve these strategic outcomes.
So what actually motivated the development of the new strategic plan? You have mentioned, what are some of the anticipated, outcomes, but what actually motivated, the development of the strategic plan?
Basically, we have in a community, and we are in a community called SAIS. As SAIS, Supreme Audit Institutions, we abide by certain framework of guidance. We subscribe to INTOSAI principles, and INTOSAI is the international standards of Supreme Audit Institutions, international organization, of Supreme Audit Institutions. And these standards require us as a SAI to be a model organization. And in being so, we have to actually have a goal, a set where we are going to. And as I said, this is not the first strategic plan of the NAO. It's a successor to the strategic plan. So it defines now our vision, our priorities for the next 5 years, our goals. Where do we want to be in the next 5 years? So that is the motivating factor. We have to set this, the platform, the basis, the benchmark for where we want to go. We have to set the targets for where we want to go. And that is very important, Ali, because it will allow us now to have some measurable indicators, some measurable targets of how far are we how far the journey is supposed to be, but more importantly also to assess ourselves on that journey. So this is the bottom line in terms of where we want to go and how do we go there. And then we now set ourselves the mechanisms. We now put up the resources, we now put up the human resources, in particular the financial resources, to get to that journey, to get to that destination.
And you talk about financial resources. How much are we talking about implementing this strategic plan? 5 years? Lofty ideas, great anticipation, outcomes?
I believe it's in the realms of $1 million, if I'm not mistaken. Okay. I think, if I'm not caught off guard on that one.
Okay.
Basically, it is a resource-driven strategic plan. As you know, audit demands high-level financial and material resources. Okay. And these are all important. For example, in the era that we are now, we need digital systems, and this is one of the envisaged areas. For example, if you want to talk about improve financial reporting, and the Gambia government is using a system for financial reporting, which is the IFMIS, the Integrated Financial Management System. So we have to now develop systems that will allow us to audit within the IFMIS, to audit through the IFMIS, and not to audit around the IFMIS. That is, now we have to come also digital in terms of our audit procedures and our audit methodologies. So therefore, the resource requirement is quite huge, and we are envisaging the budget support that we are getting from the government through the consolidated fund. It's a requirement that the government actually funds the NAO, but we are also envisaging the support of partners. We are envisaging the support of partners and also donor funds and other peers in order to realize these strategic ambitions.
So in the event these funds are not coming, what will happen?
It is a very good question. It's a challenge, though. As you know, we always planned, as these are plans, these are budgets, they are not sacrosanct. So we'll be forced to do some resource mobilization. We'll be forced to cut on our activities. Okay. We'll be forced to look for other options in terms of creating some other avenues in terms of realizing the same goals. But probably it will have an impact on our work. It will have an impact on the outputs that we are supposed to, we targeted for ourselves.
In the past, I have seen many institutions develop strategic plan, and in most cases, they outsource it to consultants and all those things. Was it the case with the NAO as well?
Not at all.
Okay.
But in the NAO, we try to live as a model organization. As I mentioned, this is very much enshrined in the principles of Intersite 12, okay, which is the SAI as a value addition institution in the society. So we have been very much conscious of the need for having a strategic plan, and we developed an in-house team. Of course, we also had support from our peers. As I told you, the wall of Supreme Audit institutions, or what we call SAIs, National Audit Offices in some countries, other names, we have a very good peer mechanism that also allows us to see what our colleagues are doing, what our other sister SAIs are doing. So we actually had interaction with our colleagues from the Intersai community, the IDI in particular. There is a community that helps on developing strategic plans, and they share their results, or they share their experiences. So we modeled from that, and then we had a team in-house. This was led by the DAG, the Deputy Auditor General on Technical, and the team actually was the one that developed the strategic plan in-house. We will encourage, of course, many organizations to do this, because I tend to say sometimes that if we, as the organization, cannot set our own strategic goals and define them, and then try to shape how we arrive at that place, then we may be somehow lacking in our leadership capabilities, because we're not supposed to really have consultants. It is not the ideal. I'm not saying it's not the good thing, but it is not an ideal world that you have a consultant. Of course, I'm not also denying consultants, there are consultancy services and whatnot, but it may be a more homegrown thing, and something that is appreciated, and something that is also valued by the people that it is implementing it. So in the NAO, it is actually something that comes from the bottom up, and then it is really the staff who were involved, and also the staff who validated the strategic plan, and they now feel they are the ones who should implement it.
So what will you look at or point to as the key distinct between this strategic plan and the previous one?
Okay, that's a very good point. The key distincts, of course, in the strategic outcomes, we have some of the strategic outcomes that are somehow twisted a little bit to fit into the current realms of things. For example, the issue of talking about increased independence. It's also about the public trust in the work of the NAO and the financial reporting framework. These are very much twisted outcomes in terms of the previous strategic plan. It focuses. Improved public financial management resources was, of course, in the previous strategic plan. It's also in our vision, it's also in the mission. But the era now we are in also requires us to model a little bit, because now we are adjusting in an era of a little bit more digitalization. You can see the advent of digitalization. So we're talking about issues, and also the challenges have changed. For example, the landscape in which we operated some years ago is quite a little bit of now adjusting, because now with the advent of what I would call the social media and other tools, then there is increased visibility. How do we ensure that the work of the NAO, or the NAO, remains a trusted organization in this multi-variable world? That is all.
Yes, I mean, let's now look at the mandate of the office itself. I mean, share with us, what's the scope of your mandate? I mean, do you audit every institution, or you are limited?
But definitely, Ali, the mandate of the NAO is quite wide, if I may use the word. The NAO is required in the Constitution, and sections 159 onwards to section 60 onwards, to audit all public institutions, which is actually including the government and its branches, various branches, the judiciary, the National Assembly, and all public enterprises and projects. So the mandate of the NO is quite large. But are we able to audit all?
Yeah.
that is a very good question. Of course, we are not able to do all. However, we do devise, we call, this mandate is called the audit universe. In our language of audit, we said this is the audit universe, the entire scope of work that the NAO should do. And the audit universe, we do an assessment in that universe. What are the most important audits that we face, for example, that we need to do? So we do kind of an assessment, and this is a planning. Okay. That planning, it is the output of it is called the annual operational plan. So at the end of at the start of the year or before the beginning of the year, we do an assessment and we do an annual operational plan. An annual operational plan will now allow us to sectionalize or to segregate those audits that we can do in the year out of the scope. The remaining that we cannot do, we usually would outsource those audits. We usually would now hire private firms to do those audits on our behalf. And this is how we try to complete the task that is embedded. And the challenge is that we still could have, out of that audits that we are supposed to do and that of the private firms, to challenge of completing those audits, all of it on time. So therefore, there is this issue of the backlog of audits
of audit reports.
Exactly, and the like. So therefore, in short, we are trying to do at most to cover all the audits that we are supposed to do. However, it still remains a challenge because obviously, as I mentioned earlier, audit needs resources. So even this hiring of these private firms will require them to be paid for their services. And also, every audit that we are supposed to do, we're supposed to deploy the manpower, the logistical requirement, the administrative requirements, and also the other requirements relating to that.
And aside from that, I mean, talking about issue of, backlog of audit reports, after the entire process, what do you do with the reports? After completing your audit and everything, what do you do with it?
The end product of the audit is the report, okay. But that end product is the input to another process. Okay. Usually, at the end of an audit, we will share the report with the stakeholders, the auditee. Okay. That is the client. Okay. But as you know, in the Constitution, the National Audit Office is an independent office. Yeah. But we report to the Parliament. We report to the National Assembly. Okay. And particularly the FPAC, the committee, the Finance and Public Accounts Committee of the National Assembly. And of course, the Public Enterprise Committee as well. But this is where we report. So we report to Parliament, and our reports now forms as the basis for parliamentary scrutiny of those organizations that we audit. Remember that public sector auditing is about we, as the auditors, making an evaluation or examination of the use of resources that were entrusted on those organizations, and then reporting back to Parliament on how those stewardship of those resources have been carried out by the relevant entities.
So where does your work stops after submitting the report to the National Assembly? Is that where it all stops as far as your mandate is concerned?
That is a very good question. Exactly. I would say okay. It may not necessarily stop there, okay. But it has a preliminary stop at that stage. Okay. But in the sense that once we report to Parliament now, Parliament takes over the mandate of scrutinizing the report. Of course, we also serve as an aid to Parliament. So that's why I said semi. Exactly. There we assist the Parliament in scrutinizing those reports, because the Parliament now is required by their own modus of operandi to invite those entities in a consideration session, in a presentation session, to present the report and then to ask questions relating to those reports.
Especially on the management letter.
Especially on the management letter, particularly on the management letter, you're quite right. Yeah. But so especially, and then in that process, we help Parliament in executing that function, because we serve as an aid to the parliamentary committees. The other part also, which will come later, which is that we do follow-ups audits. So after this audit is completed, we can go and follow up and see how did the management, after the parliamentary scrutiny, implemented those recommendations those agreed upon recommendations and those agreed instructions or resolutions that the Parliament have taken.
Okay. So I mean, what do you look out for when you are doing this audit exercise? What do you look out for in an institution when you go for auditing exercise? I mean, what are some of the key things that you look at? The specifics idea, I mean.
Well, that will.
Because I know people watching will like to know. I mean, when you say auditors, what do they actually look out for?
That's a good question, but also it's a very it's like a broad. It's broad in the term that auditors will not just come and look for certain things. There's an objective, and also there are types of audits. Okay. So in each audit, there will be an audit objective that will be defining what the auditors would be interested in looking at. And that objective is usually defined in the engagement letter. When the auditors, before coming to your place, they send an engagement letter. That will tell you, okay, we are coming to do a compliance audit on this particular institution, for example. And in a compliance audit, for example, they may be looking at compliance with laws and regulations for a particular subject matter. They're going to check how well this institution comply with the laws and regulations. For example, the laws that are governing it, the act that are governing it, how is well it is complying with those laws. So that is one example. But in another example, the audit might be interested in providing a financial statement audit, for example, a financial statement audit. Those ones, the objective will be a little bit different because that one, the auditor would express some form of opinion on the financial statements and then assessing whether the trueness and the fairness of these financial statements. So that one, the auditor will kind of look whether there are material misstatements that are contained in these financial statements, or either they're born from error or they're born from fraudulent practices. So this is, the objectives could differ. In other audits, for example, value for money, we do performance audits which are usually called value for money audits. Those ones, the auditors...
That's on procurement?
Performance audits can be in many topics. Okay. It can be a very many general topics. We check a subject matter. But in general, performance audit would assess the economy, the efficiency and the effectiveness of a particular subject matter being studied. And for example, we did performance audit on the obstetric services of the National Ministry of Health. Okay. And performance audits were done on land policy, for example, on the Ministry of Lands. So those ones, they look at the economy, the efficiency and effectiveness of a particular subject matter, and then assess where improvements could be made. We did a performance audit, for example, also on the water distribution in NAVEC, as an example, and I think many other performance audit reports, of course, but you pick a particular subject matter and then assess. So going back to the question that what will the auditors do for? It will depend on the type of audit, and it also depends on the objective of that particular assignment. Okay.
Many of your reports, some dating as far as 2020, have revealed, I mean, damning misuse of public funds. I mean, yet there seems to be a pattern of inaction, according to many. Why do you think there is that such persistent gap between, I mean, your audit findings and, of course, enforcement or prosecution?
It's a challenging question, Ali. You know why? Because the audits has a particular mandate and also limitations. We do the audits, as you said earlier. We do report to those entities, and we also report to the oversight body, National Assembly, as I mentioned. So now the audit doesn't have the enforcement mechanisms, of course. So therefore, the enforcement is left to another party to do that, which usually is the entities. Those are charged with governance. The entities charged with governance, if a particular audit makes findings that are somehow serious in terms of misappropriation of public funds, is those charged with governance who have the responsibility, the primary responsibility, to make sure that those things are corrected and they are adjusted as per the recommendations of the audit. Because audits will usually recommend, for example, for the restitution of those public funds. So therefore, but recently there has been some significant strides in that area. I'm not sure whether you're following up with the resolutions of the FPAC on the COVID funds, for example. There has been some magnificent difference in what we had been struggling with in terms of implementation of recommendation and what we are seeing now. And that is exactly where, when institutions are playing a very critical role, like the National Assembly, they adopted resolutions that were widely circulated and also widely implemented, and there were, of course, follow-up prosecutions on those cases. I think they are still, even the process is ongoing at the moment. So we are seeing some very, very good improvement in that line, where actually the Parliament is taking a very appropriate stance in terms of making the recommendations and making them resolutions and enforcing that those resolutions actually see through to restitution of.
But are you surprised that there are some key recommendations made by the FPAC regarding the COVID-19 response of your audit report that have not been implemented? That some individuals were to be sent on administrative leave that hasn't been implemented.
I think there are some, I want to believe, but let me allow you to.
You conducted an audit report on the COVID response in 2020. I mean, your key findings included mismanagement and irregularities in procurement and distribution of food and medical items, overpricing and lack of proper documentation, and payment made to non-existing suppliers. This is quite serious.
That is serious. Yeah. Actually, as you captured, these are all captured in the COVID reports, but I believe the parliamentary resolutions address some of these issues. I believe now the slow pace of the implementation of the parliamentary resolution is what is being questioned, which is a valid question, which we all share. However, we believe that the process is still not exhausted. It is still an ongoing process, and I believe that there will be outcome. The outcomes of those processes will yield the desired results that we recommended.
But are you surprised that the slow pace of implementation of most of these recommendations? Your office, to be honest, we have to give you the credit. I mean, you've been doing a fantastic job. You've conducted several audit reports. I mean, in 2017. Government accounts audit. Your key findings included over $300 million unaccounted for, lack of supporting documents for several expenditures, evidence of ghost workers on government payroll. Many of them, you conducted series of them. I have a list here that I can go through. Audit of foreign missions. I mean, your findings, embassies failed to submit financial reports, unexplained withdrawals and improper accounting practices, state-owned enterprises. You have key findings, poor financial management, corruption, inefficiency. I mean, a series of them that your office has carried out. Credit to your office for doing this thing. But the implementation of these recommendations.
As I said earlier,
isn't this frustrating your work?
To some extent, and the audit office or the auditors, like citizens anywhere, because we are part of the society, we could be frustrated by those things. However, we must also recognize that the process is not a very straightforward process. It requires some degree of intervention by different stakeholders. Once you're talking about these issues, of course, the recommendations, as we shared, have been. But I think there are also lack of updates, probably, on some of these things, because I think some of them, to be frank with you, I have seen magnificent improvements in those areas. There were recoveries being made, especially on the COVID. Yes, probably there is no communication.
In what areas recoveries?
In the COVID funds that you in the reports that you mentioned, for example, on the government accounts, the report that you mentioned, there were recoveries made in losses where losses were encountered. So there are a series of efforts being made. However, the problem sometimes is the disconnect between when the reports are out, when the reports have been discussed, and when those actions take place. Whether we go back or whether the follow-up is done to capture that at this particular instance, there were recoveries being made by the state, relevant state actors, for example, by the police, for example, by the accountant general, and also by the, but this also do come up with the resolution, because these issues are all still on the table of the National Assembly members. As you follow through, they have been calling for the relevant government executives, for the relevant government entities to come and explain and give them updates on the implementation of those recommendations. And this includes the government accounts, which some of the finance you mentioned, and as well as the COVID funds. So probably there is that disconnect sometimes between what is being done and also what has happened what was reported to have happened. Well, I can tell you that we are not satisfied with the status of recommendation implementation. But as I said earlier, this is a challenge, but that is not entirely within the hands of the NAO. we are just supposed to report to some extent. Of course, we have some leverage in terms of ensuring restitution, for example, the surcharge issues. But those issues also have limitation in terms of how do you actualize, how do we implement such a mechanism, because the law provides for it, but it did not detail out how it is going to be done. So there is a gap in terms of the administration of that particular process.
Have you or your team ever experienced political pressure or interference while conducting or publishing your audit reports?
Not at all. I think we have seen a very big improvement in that area.
Really?
Yes, actually, I must admit.
You've never come under any pressure that you should suppress certain report from going out to the public?
Not at all. And remember that the NAO is an institution enshrined in the Constitution, and also in the constitutional provisions, the Auditor General shall not be directed or controlled by anybody, any person or authority or organization in the performance of his work. And definitely I have not experienced any form of control or direction in terms of reporting. So we are publishing as we are seeing those reports being finalized. And we are also doing our work in the execution. There are challenges in terms of getting all the information that we may need for audit. That is different from being directed or controlled. That is, sometimes our teams will face challenges in getting the required information. So access to information is a challenge. So unrestricted access, we are supposed to have unrestricted access to information, but this is not well understood by many of our clients. So we have been doing some sensitization work, for example, to sensitize people more on the need for them to be transparent in terms of opening up to auditors. Because the more you open to the auditor, the lesser the easier the work of the auditor is, and also the lesser the suspicion or the risk of or other things being perceived. So there is
any instance. Give us any instance where that happened, where you went on an auditing and you feel like someone was trying to, keep certain information from you.
There are many instances.
Example?
You see in the government accounts. In the government accounts,
yes.
You've just mentioned the issue of non-supporting documents.
Yes,
exactly. So those are examples. Many a times you will go. This may not be deliberate for some of them. This may be due to administrative issues. Sometimes some of them will process those payments.
What kind of administrative issues? Mm-hmm. An institution mandated by law to conduct audit is here to audit, and you are saying.
Sometimes, let me give the example of administrative example. For example, institutions, ministries are required to process payment vouchers and maintain them. However, those ministries have a centralized payment system, which is the Accountant General's Department. And they usually carry those vouchers to the Accountant General's Department for where the payment will be executed. Okay. If an accountant mistakenly takes those documents to the Treasury, where Treasury also have their files, and expect that the accountant at the ministry has his own file, there are instances where the accountants, when you particularly audit that entity without going to the Treasury, you will find that the documentation is not up to date. These are examples, but obviously some of them also are instances where people try to frustrate the audit process or try to frustrate the auditors in terms of providing the information on time. But it is, as I said, always, this is at the benefit of the institutions. If you provide this information, the better it is for the auditor to understand, and also for you to provide the necessary explanation to the auditor at the material time. But if you wait until, you will see many instances, if you follow our deliberations at the past, for example, you will see institutions bringing documentation at the level of past. And I always tell them that this is not the place to do that. And also members of parliament will frown upon them and say, why didn't you provide it to the auditors at the material time? So sometimes it's about just having lack of appreciation of the audit process, lack of awareness of how useful this information is to you yourself in providing it to the auditors.
All right, well, viewers, you're watching QTV, and this is your weekly State of Affairs program. My guest this week is Mamadou Cisse, who is the Auditor General of the Gambia's National Audit Office. We'll go with a short break, and when we return, discussion continues. Do stay tuned.
As the fastest growing GSM company in the Gambia, QCell has the widest 4G plus coverage in the country, 3 times faster internet speed than our competitors. So switch now and dial *335# and enjoy what true 4G feels like. QCell, Gambia's trusted network.
The art of juggling is a true spectacle of agility, coordination, and speed. A symbol of progression, precision, and mastery. .5G speed is like having the juggler in your pocket. With lightning-fast download and upload speeds, you'll easily be able to juggle even the busiest workdays. Whether you're a busy entrepreneur, a creative, or just someone who wants to stay connected. Juggle your tasks with ease with QCell 5G speed. The future is here. It's fast, reliable, and efficient. First brought to you by QCell. We innovate, others follow.
As the fastest growing GSM company in the Gambia, QCell has the widest 4G plus coverage in the country, 3 times faster internet speed than our competitors. So switch now and dial *335# and enjoy what true 4G feels like. QCell, Gambia's trusted network.
Hello viewers, welcome back from that short break. You're watching QTV, the Gambia Sports Private TV station, and we are broadcasting live from our studios here on Kairaba Avenue. My name is Aliou Sise, and this is your weekly State of Affairs program. My guest this week is Mamadou Sise, who is the Auditor General of the Gambia's National Audit Office. Eji, thank you so much for coming. Once again, welcome back from that short break.
Thank you.
We were discussing, some of the challenges you face with institutions actually, withholding some of the information that you are required to be able to conduct a very transparent audit exercise. In whose interest are they keeping this information from?
I wouldn't know, honestly, Aliou, in whose interest. As I said, for us, it is in their interest as auditees. Okay. To provide the auditor with all the information that he requires at the material time of the audit. But of course, sometimes, Aliou, you know, the public sector in particular, we do face challenges of misplacement of documentations, yes. And people come and go in the public sector. And certainly these challenges also do happen. For example, people in that turnover rate of officers in public sector organizations, sometimes they are not the very people that have been audited. We are not the very people that are currently still awarding.
Especially when Parliament concerns reports of 2020.
Exactly. When they are dealing with backwards.
Imagine, for example, if Khalifa Mbaye was the then head there and he's not there, and I'm now
perfect
there.
Example. Perfect example. And that is exactly where the challenges also is. So it is always in the interest of those who are being audited to avail. But also the engagement is very important. The openness in terms of engaging. Sometimes people do not engage at the relevant time. And with the relevant people, living in office doesn't actually exonerate an individual from helping the current occupier of the office to avail relevant information to reviewers, not only auditors, even the GDP and other reviewers. So it is always in the interest of the person being reviewed, and also, of course, in the interest of the wider accountability system that information is provided timely when it has been requested.
Recently, you raised concerns about what you called, the premature media leaks of draft audit queries. Some argue, that publicizing these findings, might also pressure institutions to act. How do you, in your portfolio as AG, balance, transparency with, that procedure integrity?
Yeah, this is a very important question that we really would want to share our opinions, of course, with the general public, but particularly with your colleagues in the media. I think, you know, a process is supposed to be allowed to see its final conclusion. prematurely publication of those reports does harm the audit process very well. Because in the audit process, there is a process of objectivity. It's an objective process that gives the auditee the opportunity for them to react to particular, for example, audit queries. When audit, let me just, maybe if you allow me to dwell into the process itself, you know, initially when we are on the audit process, the initial phase of interaction where you have the auditor picks up something and sees something because he's taking something against law, established criteria, and he might have a misunderstanding or he might have a lack of explanations. If this initial explanation is provided, usually those queries do not feature in the management letter. And therefore, if somebody publicizes those things, actually it hurts the confidence of our clients. The interaction that we will have with the clients in terms of opening up to them, asking the relevant questions, them sharing the relevant answers, it hurts that process because at the end of the day, they will be seeing that auditors have probably concluded on a particular matter, whereas the process is just beginning. So it is very important that we allow the process to continue, to see its logical conclusion, and then the reports are published. I can tell you, Aliu, the audit office is very, very interested in publicizing its work and its publicizing reports. And there's a requirement for us to...
How so are you that perhaps that information is not even coming out from your office? It could be from, from your client itself who are already maybe getting a draft report and someone in that office is leaking that information.
To be frank, we don't know. As I said...
I'm just giving you
it's a very good example. It's a very good example. I wouldn't doubt that. We do have systems, though, in place that we observe very high degree of confidentiality in the office, and also every single auditor is supposed to sign a code of ethics, a code of ethics declaration at the start of an exercise. And this is even done at the start of the year, but even at the start of every single exercise. So we expect our auditors to uphold a very high degree of integrity and in conducting their work. However, we do also have a mechanisms in place in the audit process that can allow us to self-proof, to kind of check in the process, where is this information, whether the information that the auditors have is what is out there, or whether the information that the client is supposed to have is what is out. And these are issues that we're also evolving because, of course, security around information is an evolving matter. So we are trying to evolve in that area in terms of protecting the reports, even in sharing the reports, and the stages in protecting the report with our IT system. For example, now we are using IT system to do source audit. So even the gathering of the queries is done in a system. The writing of the queries is done in the what we call the GAMSIT, the Gambia Audit Enhancement Technology. So these are processes that we are evolving around, but we are trying to also make sure that the process itself, it doesn't allow for this kind of issues. But obviously, it is not something that is 100% possible that you can guarantee self-proof of leakages of reports. But this is a challenge that we...
Earlier on, we mentioned the issue of, backlog of audit reports. As we speak, how many institutions can you tell us are up to date with their audit report? Because it is very clear in the financial regulation that every institution must submit their audited financial report by the end of the fiscal year.
31st of March,
exactly.
After the end of the fiscal year.
So how many institutions, as we speak, are up to date with their audit
You know, this is a specific question. I would have to contact my
But are they doing well, institutions?
There is a magnificent improvement in that area in the last 1 or 2 years, to be frank with you. But we have now, for example, just recently completed the audit of the Financial Intelligence Unit, the audit of the, I've signed off some few reports that are this year, current year reports. Okay. The Financial Intelligence is one of them, the Petroleum Commission, if I believe, something like that. Okay. Very few. But to be frank with you, Aliu, they are very few. Okay. These are in the numbers less than 10. Certainly less than 10 or around 5 or so, of course, including the NAO. Okay. So the NAO.
Oh, really? I was going to ask you that question. Like whether the NAO has itself undergone any operational audit? Because I want to know. I want to find out.
Yes.
Who audits the NAO?
This is a very, very interesting question. We always get asked. Yeah. But the auditor of the NAO, as in the Constitution, also in the Act, in the National Audit Act, is appointed by the Parliament. So NAO also get audited, and our auditors are appointed from among the private firms.
So Parliament appoints
the
auditors of the NAO.
NAO.
Who audits the National Assembly?
Technically, it's us. We do audit them. We are the national auditors. We
Really?
Yes, we audit them.
Okay, that's interesting.
That's quite interesting.
Really?
So yeah, we do audit the Parliament. Like I said at the opening, the NAO audits all government institutions, and Parliament is included. So apart from itself, of course, we cannot audit ourselves. So therefore,
what were the key findings, National Assembly?
No, the audit of the National Assembly is an ongoing exercise.
Okay.
It has not been completed. So, of course, as an audit that is not completed, we would not be able to I haven't seen the report yet, in fact, to be frank.
All right.
Yes.
Okay. I mean, let me just ask you this question from your own point of view as seasoned auditor, Auditor General. I mean, in one of his interviews in 2023, I mean, the President speaking in Wolof remarked that, I quote, "Most of these allegations of corruption in my government are emerging from audit reports, and audit reports emerge from opinions. Audit reports can have mistakes and can be biased." Do you agree that audit reports can be biased?
I would just want to address the issue specifically because audit reports are supposed to be objective statements and assessments that are done that establish criteria are followed through, a methodology is followed through to actually bring out some results, which is methodological in its process to bring out those results, and then it's an assurance service. It provides a degree of assurance. Of course, an absolute assurance document. So it is a document that provides reasonable assurance to the users of those intended reports about the degree of compliance in terms of financial, so in terms of compliance audit, for example, to a particular subject matter. But of course, Ali, the problem I think is going back to the types of audits. You know, the NAO doesn't do only financial audits.
But can audit reports be biased?
Let me just
yes.
develop.
No, yes or no? Yes or no? Or AG, yes or no? Can audit reports be biased?
Let me develop. I think if you allow me to develop, then I'll come
no,
to
I just want a straight answer. Yes or no? Can audit reports be biased?
I wouldn't be able to say an audit report can be biased or not biased. I've explained the audit process. Okay. I said the audit is a process, a systematic process that actually is somehow scientific in its nature. That gets out a particular product in terms of assessing the status of a financial health in the financial health of an organization, for example, but also a compliance with laws and regulation. So there can be some degree of objectivity. There can be some degree of assurance that the audit report provides. It doesn't provide absolute assurance, as I said this word. There is what is called audit reports provide reasonable assurance. Reasonable assurance. These are terms that, of course, need also more explanations themselves. But audit reports provide reasonable assurance to the intended users on a particular subject matter. As I was explaining, the audit types that we do differs. Financial audits is one category. Compliance audit is another category. The issue of performance audit, value for money audits is another category. And value for money audits, for example, they are subject matters, they are research-based. Okay. So you can see, depending on who is reading the report and what level of understanding of his reporting is, what level of understanding of the subject matter is, he can interpret it in his own ways. But then I wouldn't be just able to pinpoint that a particular report can be this or that. So
it can be biased.
Well, I don't want to use the term bias or
in your office, have you ever received any report that indicates that your auditors, submitted a biased report to you? And
well,
for instance, might say, that report wasn't fair, it was biased.
You know, in the code of ethics of an auditor, these principles called code of ethics of an audit, professional in fact. But even this enshrined in our code of ethics, it has objectivity, it has confidentiality, integrity, and professional behavior. So we are supposed to abide by these principles. However, I cannot guarantee you that 100%, every single one of our auditors can abide by those particular principles at any particular point in time? I can't, because they're human beings. They are also fallible, isn't it? So, but I can tell you the process itself, the process in which these things follow, because that individual can do something that is perceived to be biased, but it follows through a process. That individual comes to the office, he reviews it, and his work goes to a reviewer. So reviewer 1 looks at it, and reviewer 1 sends it to another reviewer. Reviewer 2 looks at it, and reviewer 2 sends it to a third reviewer. For that, there are levels of review that ensure that this process is actually somehow sanitized, somehow filtered, in order to the end product would be something that can be relied on by other, that can provide reasonable assurance. That end product can provide some degree of assurance that this product is not something that is entirely made up by one particular person who is fallible in its intent.
I know, you're not telling me whether yes or no. But currently, what will you look at as the biggest challenges facing your office?
Challenges in terms of the independence of the office, that is one of the challenges that we are facing. But I think the greatest challenge would be...
I don't understand. What do you mean by independence of the office? I thought the office is as independent.
Yeah, independence actually is measured in fashions. If you look at the Intosai principles, the Lemma Declaration, we have Intosai principle, P1, P12. Independence is assessed in financial independence, administrative independence, and, for example, administrative, financial, and operational. Okay. Operational. So we might be operationally independent in our operations, okay, which we talked about. Okay. We might be administratively independent in our processes.
Financial.
But we might be having challenges in terms of financial independence. As you know, the country is a cash-based society. Exactly. So our finances are coming from the Minister of Finance month in, month out. And you know that means the Minister of Finance has to wait for the collections from GRA and other non-tax revenues to hit the account in order for them to determine how much they are going to give each institution. And of course, if we have to wait for that, that means also our audit process would have to wait for that resource allocation.
And you also have to give them A+ in their audit because they are giving the money.
Certainly that is not the case, but that is a challenge. So that's where a financial independence of an audit office is very important. Usually it is enshrined and it is guaranteed in, of course the Gambia is a very difficult challenge, but usually the finances that are needed for this kind of independent offices is supposed to be provided upfront when the budget starts. For example, in some audit offices, in the other countries, what happens is that at the 1st of January, the Minister of Finance transfers the budget of the audit office to its operational account. That will allow the audit office to plan ahead and well execute its audits very independently of any other challenges that it faces financially. So this is one of the challenges that is facing the audit office, of course, but it's not unique to the audit office. It's, of course, also faced by other independent institutions. And so this is financial resources also in general in terms of human resources, the resource base, because auditors need high degree of competent individuals, high degree of professionals in many areas, in variety of areas. So that diversity in terms of the staff complement is also some of the challenges that we are currently
Are you losing some of your staff to the private firms?
We are losing some of them, not to the private firms.
Why are they leaving? Why?
Because of the challenges in terms of keeping them.
Why can't you give them better incentives to keep them?
And I talked about that earlier. Yeah. You remember, we just talked about the financial challenges in terms of making it a reality, because this is just the challenges that auditors are well-trained individuals, highly competent individuals, and highly sought-after individuals. So these are some of the challenges. But another challenge, Ali, that is very important is the challenge we just discussed in terms of implementation of recommendations. But we see challenges in that area. As I said, audits, one of the speakers that I just witnessed recently said, when audits are only having an impact when they are recommendations are implemented. So there is one of the challenges that auditors or audit officers are faced with and baffled with, because the impact of an audit can only be seen when the recommendations are implemented by those relevant organizations. So I think these are few of the challenges that we are encountering, and we are hoping that with the advent of the NAO bill, which is currently in Parliament, in the executive for potential transmission to Parliament, some of the challenges could be ameliorated in those circumstances. Access to information, I mentioned the access to information issue, but that we do have unrestricted access, but obviously sometimes access to information is a challenge in the awareness. Awareness is also a challenge.
It's the same way some people say you are also not, making certain reports public. So the access to information is on both sides. The public is saying the NAO in some instances is not making certain reports public. No, perhaps someone is pulling these things from somewhere, telling them don't make this report public.
I think this is a misconception.
Okay.
But yeah, because the NAO would only make the report public after it has been discussed at Parliament.
Okay.
So I think sometimes the challenge is some of these reports are known before they are presented at Parliament. And of course, the NAO also has to follow through the process. We had to wait for the parliamentary deliberations of those reports in order to upload them on our website. But I can tell you our website is a very user-friendly website, and it's
all
also had a very much, all the reports that are due for publication are published in the report on the web.
AG, I'm being told we're running out of time, but finally, if you were to leave office tomorrow, just assuming, what unfinished business do you think will keep you up at night?
That's a very, very tough one, Ali. As we speak, well, I think
one unfinished business that will keep you awake.
It is to enhance the governance processes and accountability systems in our country. Ali, governance is very important, and we have an unfinished business on governance, enhancing governance, and the governance is one of the most important elements that is keeping us at bay. And if you ask me what are my concerns, is really one of them I should have mentioned is also governance, because the more we have an improved governance environment, an enhanced governance environment, and an enhanced accountability system, and enhanced stewardship of resources, there we have a better country and a better people. Thank you. Thank
you so much, Mamadou Cisse, Auditor General, Gambia's National Audit Office. He was my guest on this week's edition of your weekly State of Affairs program. AG, thank you so much for coming on the program. Quite appreciated. Well, viewers, with that, we bring an end to this week's edition of your weekly State of Affairs program. Do join me next week. Until then, bye-bye from me and the entire team.